Hey toy family, welcome to the Marsham Toy Hour, where we discuss anything and everything designer toys. I'm Gary Ham.
I am Carlos East.
I'm Chris Reiniak.
And guys, I'm sick as a dog. I've had the flu all week. I went to the doctor's today. They said I have flu A with a sinus infection. It sucks.
Wow.
But you know what? I'm actually feeling pretty decent, and I'm revved up for this episode.
Are you drinking again, Gary?
Actually, no, but I have been taking a lot of shots of an over-the-counter flu medicine.
Yeah, I have the same thing you have, man.
Oh, geez, everybody's got it. I better not catch it over Skype. I'll be pissed.
It's super funny because at work with George, he was like making sure every day I had my mask on because he was going to Hawaii this week.
Oh, yeah. That's funny.
So he was giving me so much shit, like put your mask on.
Well, hopefully he hasn't caught it and he's having a good time out there in Hawaii.
I don't think he did. He did say that it was muggy out there. So.
Oh, really? Well, it can get that way. So, guys, we have a guest joining us tonight, and it's been suggested by several listeners that we should invite collectors on and get to know them and their thoughts on the toy scene, as well as how and why they collect.
Oh, nice.
This is the first collector series, and we are being joined by Robert Howell.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Hey,
Robert.
Thanks for coming in, Robert. I want to let all the listeners know that you have the most difficult Instagram name ever.
I kind of get that one a lot.
Yeah, I'll spell it out for the listeners. It's the letter X, Duchess _ Gummy Buns, the letter X. You couldn't make that any easier.
You know, I'm a really big fan of Adventure Time, and one of the main staple characters in the show is Lumpy Space Princess. And there's an episode where they all go masquerading at a mansion for kind of like a Halloween party. And Lumpy Space Princess has an invitation in her hand that says that her name is Duchess Gummy Buns. And initially I had just kind of made the name as a joke, but then, you know, a lot of people got laughs out of it, and I changed it back to what it had been previously, and I actually got several people like, you should keep that just for the sake of it being funny. So now it's just kind of like an identity I've assumed for the last 2 years.
Oh, cool.
Nice.
Okay, so some of our listeners probably aren't familiar with you, and some of them probably are. They've probably seen you around the conventions, or if they go to Lulubelle, they've definitely seen you there as you do some work for Lulubelle.
I do.
But you have a beautiful set of hair. It is not a hair is out of place. You're like the Fawns. You're the Fawns.
Hey, I'm totally okay with taking on that moniker.
Yeah.
Maybe that'll be my new Instagram name.
I think that's going to be our promotional image for the week. Little Happy Days action. Who wants to be Ralph Mouth?
Hey, Gary, I'm noticing a trend here with you having a lot of hair envy.
Yeah.
What's going on?
That could be. I mean, some guys look at cleavage. Last time I looked at Robert, I was looking at his hairline.
Oh,
Oh my God! I smell a crush.
Another man crush. I made the list.
You made the
list, Robert.
It's not hard. It's not hard.
Hey, way to make our guest feel special, Gary. Real nice.
Yeah, come on.
Before we get into knowing a little bit more about you, Robert, how about we just start off with a quick round of leaks and sneak peeks? Why don't you start us off?
Sure. First and foremost, on the SofuB side, the Japanese soft vinyl, I've gotten some photo peeks of the artist Splurt is releasing a new mid-size figure. He's calling it Bam Bam. It's pretty mutinous, very relative to kind of like 80s gross out aesthetic. It's a figure. It's got 2 legs but 3 arms, and it kind of has like a melted, conjoined 2 faces into one sort of look to it. Really, really cool looking figure. And Miscreation Toys, Jeremy Rimmel, is actually starting up another figure called the Mortimer Post. It's very, very, very gross out, this one. If you're not familiar with Miscreation Toys, he made a couple figures known as the Autopsy Staple Baby and Gurgle.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So they're kind of like zombie babies. people have pretty mixed feelings about that one, but I find them to be pretty fantastic. So I can't wait to see where he takes these 2 new ones.
Wow, cool.
Thanks.
I think you pretty much just told us what kind of collector you are.
I mean, that's one facet.
But we'll get more into that. Who wants to go next, Chris or Carlos?
I can go.
Okay.
I've been following this artist called TJ Cha. His thing is called Devil Planet Studio. And he's been doing this figure. It's a girl, and it's called Sally Loves Bomb. His Instagram is TJ_CH8. And it's pretty awesome because this dude sculpts it by hand, and then cuts it up and then separates like all these different pieces, color casts them. And this figure is really, really nice. It's called Sally Loves Bomb. I think he's going to do a pre-sale sometime soon. I'll keep my eyes open. All his pieces are hand painted and hand sculpted and hand casted by him.
Okay.
And it's pretty cool. TJ Cha from,
Nice.
I think it's South Korea.
Yeah, I think I saw that one. I think the girl holding the bomb, it almost looks
Yeah,
like
and the bomb has like a bite taken off of it.
Yeah,
and it's
almost like a
pretty awesome.
jawbreaker.
Yeah, it looks like a jawbreaker.
Yeah, that thing's got some really great proportions. It's very reminiscent of old school like pinup style. Actually, kind of reminds me of your older art, Gary.
Yeah,
Oh,
I was gonna
nice.
say the same. Like all your pinup stuff.
My old pinup days. Yeah. All right. What about you, Chris?
I just ran across a Mighty Jaxx release, and they seem to have a release every 2 to 3 days.
Yes.
It's the James Jean staple pigeon.
Yeah, looks nice.
And have you guys seen the previews of this thing? The sculpt is amazing.
Yeah,
I haven't
nice.
seen that one yet.
Yeah, it's pretty great. I've only seen a few shots of like the top of the actual piece, but they showed a photo of the rendering, and it's really great. It's sort of like one of those, it's more of an art piece than a toy,
Right.
but it's pretty beautiful.
No, I agree. I saw it in very impressive.
I think they're only making them available for 24 hours.
Oh wow.
So
Really?
yeah, the release is March 4th.
Wow.
Okay.
So however they sell, that's the production count.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a pre-order or not, but if you go to the Mighty Jaxx Instagram page, they have all the ordering info on there. So, but yeah,
Wow.
it's a pretty awesome piece, and if James Jean is attached to it, there's gonna be a lot of attention. So
Yep.
Yeah. I think it's gonna be just available for 24 hours, and that's at March 4th.
So by the time this comes
cool.
out, the pre-order will have already been closed.
yeah. So
Oh,
you're
wow.
too late already.
Damn. Well, mine is, this is a little self-promotion, but the Marsham Toy Hour jumped into the pennant game.
Damn.
Yeah, I don't know if there is an actual, per se, pennant game, but we decided to do it. And so we have a pretty awesome... Trailblazers. Yeah, but it's so it's a 27-inch by 9-inch wool, 2-color screen printed pennant. And it looks incredible in person. I think it ties, if you have a lot of toys on a shelf, it ties a lot of the toys together nicely, I think. If you want to see it, there's pictures on our Instagram account, Marsham Toy Hour. It's currently available in our my online shop. So you can go to superham.com. It's $20 plus, I think it's like $3 shipping. And only 25 pieces made. So if you ever thought about how you want to support the show, this is the way to do it. Head on over to the shop, pick yourself up a nice pennant, or we also have a pin to offer you.
Right on.
Nice.
You could be the first. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Maybe you
Those
should
are
have
pretty-
an Instagram contest for people that buy it. They take a photo and tag it.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's a great
Something
idea.
special.
No, I like that. So
Yeah.
maybe next episode is going to be our 1-year anniversary. So still, it's going to be too soon. We'll give any buyers some time to buy it and allow for some shipping time. But eventually, we probably will do like a nice little contest for anyone who bought one.
Nice.
Share the image, hashtag it. We'll do more details soon, but I like it. We'll do a little contest for anyone who picked that up. And actually, speaking of Instagram contests, I think it's time to pick a winner for the custom pin board that I made.
Nice.
So anyone who's not familiar, we ran a little Instagram giveaway where I showed a photo of a custom pin board that I made. It was a 1/2-inch birchwood laser cut in the shape of Hermes the Flying Bat. and I applied a layer of corkboard to it, stained the corkboard a nice shade of gray so the pins really pop from it, so you could just attach it to your wall. It looks great. And so we offered that up for a giveaway on Instagram, and we had 13 entries. So Robert, being our guest, why don't you pick a number from 1 to 13, and you'll pick our winner.
Ooh, let's see, a well-rounded number. We'll go with lucky 7.
Miss Muju, congratulations.
Congratulations.
Yeah, so Miss Muju, just send me an email, or I'll contact you through Instagram, and we'll get that out to you. Congratulations.
Rock and roll.
Nice.
All right, Robert, so let's get to know you and your collecting habits a little bit.
We'll do our best.
All right, Robert. So the toy scene is fairly small, and that's kind of what gives it a strong sense of community and welcoming and everything. However, I do feel like there's a little bit of divide in some areas. So if we broke it down into like stereotype high school cliques, like the Breakfast Club.
Yeah.
Whose lunch table do you think you would be eating at most days?
I mean, me personally, I would definitely be at John Bender's table.
If we broke it down into, like, say, designer toys, would you be a resin guy, a sofubi guy, a cute guy?
You know, ever since Amy kind of pulled me in with Lulubelle, it's definitely turned into a majority sofubi. My collection overall definitely has bits and pieces everywhere. I do have resin figures, Western vinyl, a lot of sofubi, even, some pins and stuff like that, since they've been becoming more and more relevant, especially in like the last year or so. But yeah, definitely on the Eastern vinyl camp.
Okay, nice. And since you mentioned that you work with Amy over at Lulubelle Toy Bodega, can you tell us more about what your role with Lulubelle is?
Yeah, sure. I'm kind of a general hands-on kind of guy. Essentially, whatever Amy needs help with around here is pretty much my priority. So a lot of times when we get shipment in, I'll do the cutting and assembling of figures and get them bagged and headered and things like that. And when we prepare for shipping, I'll box all the orders up and she gets them ready for shipping labels and stuff like that. I also, man the general front of the store, stocking items and making sure everything looks good, greeting customers, helping people out as much as possible. So pretty much anything that doesn't have to do with anything crazy important, like, emailing the artists and, working with the numbers and stuff like that is generally what I get my hands on.
So that's cool that most people probably assume that the exclusive vinyls that Lulubelle is getting from Japan probably comes like pre-assembled, but it sounds like, pretty much the poles and maybe some, the paint work and stuff is done in Japan, but for the most part, the flashing hasn't been cut off. It just receives pretty much just disassembled. So you cut the flashing, you warm the vinyl, you assemble everything, bag and board it. So that's pretty cool that you guys do so much, work in-house too. Keeps the cost down. Yeah, I mean, not every single thing we get in comes that way, but some of it does. Okay. A lot of the in-house stuff comes in uncut and unassembled. So that's the stuff that I get, elbow deep in, and there's just flash and uncut pieces of vinyl still kind of tucked away in my sheets at home and stuff like that. So that sounds great. You mentioned that Eastern's SifuB vinyl is kind of what you lean towards mostly in your collection. Why do you think that particular medium resonates with you?
It's really so much that certain figures resonate with me. I tend to have a very addictive personality with a lot of things, and I still retain what I'd consider like a childlike wonder with a lot of stuff. I grew up with 5 older siblings, and they took a lot of my stuff as a kid and kind of bullied me out of it and things like that. So kind of collecting toys as, a 31-year-old child is, it's basically my way of being able to enjoy what I necessarily couldn't as a kid. So my current favorite figure is the Cinema Monster by Splurt/Secret Toy. And I've got 20 different variations of that figure. Wow. And that one resonates with me on a personal level because mine and my dad, one of our favorite movies to watch together was Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, which is, of course, widely known for Ray Harryhausen's stop animation work in the Cyclops. And, if you look at that figure, you can see the obvious influence in that. So aside from the fact that Splurt's paint applications on that figure are amazing, and they have a very vintage-like quality to it, it's also got, a personal place of nostalgia for, me and my dad watching that movie as a kid.
Nice. Kind of a sentimental touch there.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the sofubi scene. Like, the community appears to be very tight-knit. I see it all the time when I go to Lulubelle, and it's often where I run into you. Like, you often help out around the shop, and you even travel with them to events like Designer Con and New York Comic Con and stuff. Can you put into words what working for Lulubelle means to you, and how it's helped develop you as a collector at all?
Yeah, it's actually developed me as a collector quite a bit. What's really funny is when I first met Amy, it was the second day she ever opened Lulubelle, and it was the first time I'd ever seen SifuB. So when I first came into Lulubelle, she had a ton of Western vinyl up front and a lot of stuff I'd only seen online. So I was really freaking out about that stuff. And then she has this giant case in back with a lot of SifuB figures by like Reelhead and, of course, Lulubelle's own Grody Shogun and stuff. And I'm taking a look at these soft vinyl figures, and I just did not get it at first. And I, looked at my girlfriend, and I'm like, who in their right mind would pay $80 for this stuff?
Right.
So, but as Amy, took me in, she started to give me, a little bit of a breakdown of the process, where it derives from, what goes into it. And she started mentioning things like, oh, there's a lot of influence drawn from things like Godzilla and Ultraman and Super Sentai, which is the original Japanese Power Rangers. And these were things that I grew up with as a kid, but just didn't really make any sort of connection with it other than the fact that they were toys I had when I was a kid. So the more and more I was around it, the more and more Amy educated me on it, and the deeper level of appreciation I came to have for not only the design of these figures, but why they're painted the way they're painted, the process in which they undergo for production and things like that. So,
well done, Amy.
Yeah, having actually been to a SifuB factory in Japan and seeing how that process is done, and actually I was actually able to pull some vinyl myself in the factory. Awesome. I mean, they're made one at a time.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, it's basically how people are doing resin figures now.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, I mean, they are not mass produced in any way whatsoever.
Not in the slightest.
Yeah, I mean, you can only pull one at a time. At most, there might be four. There might be, the body, the head, and all the arms in one mold. But you don't see multiple molds or anything like that. So
no.
If anybody actually saw the process, just the process alone, not to mention the fact that there's an artist's hand there too. But if they just process alone, they would understand why the cost is what it is, and
exactly. Yeah, oddly enough, I spent 2 months in Tokyo in 2015, and I worked in a SifuB factory myself for about a week straight. And nice. I can't even begin to describe how much of a labor of love that pulling SifuB is. Like, don't get me wrong, it was super fun and time of my life and smiles all around, but there are some aspects of the process that were just beyond frustrating. The factory gets really hot, and they're generally tight quarters. The molds weigh a ton, so your arms feel like boiled noodles by the end of the day. So these factories, and they're generally small. If you remember Amy mentioning on her episode that they're usually between 1 and 4 people in one factory. So it's very tight knit quarters, very tight knit process, and things are kept very close to the chest.
Wow, good stuff. Is rarity important to you?
Rarity, I guess in its literal sense, isn't very important to me. I think, and not to say that there's anything inherently wrong with it, but I feel like if people collect strictly based on a rarity aspect of I have this and you don't kind of thing, that strips away a little bit of the fun from it. But especially in soft vinyl, there's a lot of figures that are one-offs. So the idea of just kind of owning that one unique piece is just, it's sort of, it's gratifying in its own right of wow, this is awesome that I have this only one. Like, it almost feels like it was made for you because you're the only one who has it.
Right. No, I get that totally.
Well, especially with the guys that are doing, like freehand sprays without masks and things. I mean, those are all essentially one of a kind, even if they're doing a run of, 10 or 30 figures. The same
absolutely.
color scheme, but it's, there's going to be variation between all of them.
Yeah, without question. There's even some collectors who kind of look at the marbled vinyl. If you've ever seen those, they tend to look at, even if you've got 25 figures that are the same colors of marbled, all the pores are 110% different. Not a single one has, a single part of it is the same. So we've even talked to some collectors who consider marbled toys to be one-offs as well, because every single one is extremely unique in whichever way the vinyl pours into the mold.
Yeah, and sometimes it's better, one way than another too, wherever, certain colors will pool in details. So yeah, it's sort of luck of the draw with those.
Oh yeah, without question.
Now, do you like your toys mini, small, medium, large, or extra large, or jumbo? Is there like a size preference in your toys?
I've got quite a variation in sized figures. I have smaller 3-inch resin figures like the Bog Dweller by my friends in the Bog Squad.
Okay.
If you've never heard of them, that one's about 3 inches tall. But then, I've also got figures by Mutant Vinyl Hardcore and Skinner, like the Crawless or the Berserker, that are, like between, God, I think that thing's like about a foot tall, about 12 inches tall. But then, also I have a lot of fight figures by like Secret Base and Gargamel that are about 4 inches. But then I have, the Gary Ham Monster Toydom, which you obviously know how tall that is. So,
yeah,
things, they're varied. And the way that they're displayed is generally with symmetry, but also, height differential, where the taller ones will go in back and it kind of just steps down as it approaches the front of the shelf.
Okay.
So I have a quick question about the type of SifuB that they all seem to be sort of, grotesque monsters and dark, really detailed, monstery thing.
Uh-huh.
Is there a categorization for that specific style of SifuB? I mean, it seems like it's Western and Eastern SifuB.
Yeah, I think it really depends on where the artists themselves derive their influences from. If you look at an artist like Splurt, he derives a lot of his characteristics, a lot of the textures and stuff for his toys, like the Cadaver Kid or the Uncle Steve. Very porous, very playful things like, Tales from the Crypt or Mad Balls and things like that. But then you'll switch to his other toy line, Secret Toy, and his monsters, the Kronos or the Cinema Monster, are very much based on things like Clash of the Titans, the Kraken, or, as I mentioned, Seventh Voyage of Sinbad, the Cyclops. But then, you have artists like Jeremy Rimmel, as I mentioned before, where the Autopsy Baby, that's just, I think, something that's very derived from something like Garbage Pail Kids, where there's, a childlike influence, but an extreme grotesque zombie gross out. When it comes to the two, Cadaver Kids, Autopsy Babies, those generally just tend to be referred to as SofuB or just soft vinyl toys, whereas things like Kronos or the Cinema Monster or like Paul Kaiju's Mock Bat or the Sludge Kraken will be referred to as Kaiju because it's a literal word in Japan for monster. So that when it's a monster that's derived from Japanese culture or even American culture, but just influenced by monsters in general, that'll be referred to as Kaiju, versus the other side where a general basic character will just kind of be classified as a SofuB figure.
Yeah, because there's quite a range in SofuB. Because I mean, you got stuff like Uamo or just really cute SifuB toys, all the way up to Miscreation Autopsy Babies.
Yeah. There's a huge variety in aesthetics. Like you mentioned, Uamu, she's very cutesy, and same thing with like Refreshment Toy. They have like little ice cream monsters, but they're still super playful. The expressions are very playful, and they do, the little flat face cats, things like that. But yeah, then you go on to the extreme, for a lack of better description, you've got a sofubi figure that's essentially a dead baby with a mortician's Y cut in its chest.
Right.
I'll never understand that toy, but you guys each own one, so I can't say anything.
Yeah, we had quite a conundrum with that at New York Comic Con. We had some people that walked up and were relatively impressed with it. The type of marbling that was adapted for the New York Comic Con release literally looked like rotted meat. So it had the red and pink type of raw meat texture, but also had green in there that kind of looked a little pussy.
Oh, wow.
And as far as I'm concerned, Jeremy's a bit of an aesthetic genius when it comes to, like his packaging and stuff. So he had us put them on the styrofoam meat packaging with plastic wrap around them.
Nice.
And, people would walk up to the booth, and we actually had one guy looked at it and screamed out, "What the F is this?" and walked right away from the booth.
That's fun.
And the funny thing about Jeremy is, Jeremy, you could not meet a nicer guy, a more soft-spoken, nicer guy than Jeremy.
Sweetest guy in the world.
Yeah.
But, his creative output knows no bounds.
Yeah. And the great thing about those autopsy babies, though, is like, if you can get beyond the fact that it's an autopsied baby, there are faces all over that thing. I mean, every time I look at it, you see something else.
Yeah, and the thing that really strikes me about figures like that, figures like the autopsy baby or the Ultras Bog, that's Skinner's design, is that when you look at these figures, it's just beyond phenomenal that these are sculpted by human hands. The precision and the instant recognition of, there's a face on this baby's back, or there's a ton of skulls on this Ultras Bog figure. It's just phenomenal to me of really what people are capable of creatively.
I think Rotten Rex is another good example of a figure like that. No matter what way you look at that thing, you're going to see something new.
Oh, yeah. Man, I could go on forever about James and that guy. That episode was great, by the way.
Oh, yeah. It was fun. It was good to go down memory lane with Jim a little bit.
Yeah,
that was a fun one.
Nice.
I was going to say, when you were talking about the pricing, like you saw something in the store, it was like $80. How long did it take you to acclimate to the pricing of toys?
I could actually pinpoint that one exactly. It was after Amy began the process of really telling me what goes into these figures, and it's kind of like a blood, sweat, and tears sort of thing, and then nothing is done by machines or anything. So the appreciation for it really started to develop at that point. And one day I came into Lulubelle to buy a handful of items, and most of it was Western vinyl, and I saw a figure at the bottom of her Detolf case.
Damn.
Oh no.
It was my
Of course it's on Carlos's end.
Of course.
It's not like you, Carlos.
It couldn't be subtle. It had to be something big. I was holding for it.
So anyway, excuse me. It was a fight figure by Secret Base, and if you're not familiar with fight figures, they're essentially literally what they are. They're kind of like it's a standing figure that typically has a balled up fist, or they have like boxing gloves, and they just kind of have like a fighting stance position. And this one was particularly molded after a Japanese horror punk rock band called Balzac. And they're essentially the Japanese Misfits, and a great band. So that influence had drawn me in already. I'm a big fan of fighting, things like Bellator, UFC, and Pride fighting and stuff like that. So looking at that figure, and at the time its retail was $65, which is a lot of money to spend on a single figure that's only 4 inches tall.
Right.
But then I started having that thought process of, well, look at what all goes into it. Look at how many factors of this toy personally speak to you, not only as a collector, but as a person. So that was pretty much the tipping point where it was like, you know what, when you factor that much into it, price doesn't really have to be that crazy of a thing to consider unless, you're breaking the bank or you're spending your month's rent on a single figure.
And there probably that's a pretty rare figure too, right?
At the time, they were relatively rare. Fight figures in general, between various companies like the Chicken Fever by Wombat Toys, or a lot of Real Head fight figures, and especially Gargamel and Secret Base were extreme rarities in their heyday, which was way before I got into it. By the time I had gotten into collecting sofubi, there's some that are relatively rare and pretty hard to get, and even when you do come across them, they're still pretty hefty in price. But for the most part, a lot of collectors have either moved on or really just kind of given up that particular part of their collecting, so they actually come up in droves relatively cheaply, like $30-$40.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I remember at the height of Secret Base, that stuff was so hard to get a hold of.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I actually had somebody, I was looking for one. I had made a wants list on the Skullbrain forums, and had a Skullbrain member approach me with one of the figures that I was looking for, and the price was super up there, and I had told him, hey, the same figure's on eBay for half of that, and I would rather help out a board member before eBay. So he kind of he did me a solid and said, oh man, I'm really out of touch with the pricing lately, so we ended up negotiating on it. But yeah, there's still some people who just kind of don't keep up with the general current market, so they tend to still think that some of this stuff is still super hard to get or still worth hefty price tags.
Now, when you mentioned you got that stuff through the forums, you mentioned it was the Skullbrain, but I don't think a lot of listeners are probably familiar with the Skullbrain forum. So it's skullbrains.org, and it's primarily a forum built around an appreciation for Japanese vinyl toys, monsters, and robots, and that sort of stuff. So it's not a lot of the mainstream stuff, but if you're into the Eastern vinyl and robots and kaiju and stuff like that, you'll definitely want to try to sign up and get on Skullbrain. So how long have you been on Skullbrain?
I've been on Skullbrain for a few years now. Generally overall, it's a super, super great community, but there's also some pretty hardcore people on there that not in any sense of a bad way, but they're very protective over the general sofubi scene, especially with things like social media has really opened the floodgates a lot. And I think because of things like social media, even the Kid Robot forums, the Skullbrain forums, they've gotten a lot quieter just in like the last 2 years, because people have generally just moved on to Instagram, where everything is much more acceptable. You don't have to keep logging in and things like that. And,
right.
And artists are a lot more acceptable. So
Skullbrainers, they're a tough crowd, or they could be.
Yeah, some of them can be. I mean, from my experience, it's generally just kind of been like a lighthearted hazing, just to kind of tease you, see what you're made of, see if you're really there for the collecting and things like that. Because
right,
I'm sure everybody's run into those people that will join a forum and they've got a single post and they're like, "Hey guys, just wondering how much money I can get for this," and nobody ends up acknowledging those people,
right.
Really, so
they sign up just to try to sell something on their own or something like that.
Yeah, essentially.
Okay.
Well, I mean, from what I've seen on the Skullbrain forums, people are pretty good about telling it like it is, which I always found a little refreshing, actually.
Yeah.
And it can be really off-putting to some people, but what I boiled it down to was there's a lot of guys on there that are really passionate about this hobby. And
without question.
Yeah, and that's it's pretty awesome to see that, like, something so strange and so niche that that there's people that are just so stoked about it.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that derives, like I said, from where I come from with collecting. It's a very nostalgic and childlike quality, and a lot of collectors, it's just hanging on to pieces of history that turned your personality into what it has become as an adult. I think it's a great way to retain a lot of memories and kind of just remind yourself of where you came from, sort of thing. So I think, in essence, a lot of people, when they're protective over, a general collecting scene, small as it may be, they're also trying to kind of protect a piece of themselves with it.
Yeah, and you guys, I mean, I see the congregations of you guys around like the MVH booth at and everybody's always super cool.
Yeah.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
I've gotten my number picked a couple times at the lotteries, and everybody's really warm and open and
yeah,
rad,
yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah, it's a good community.
Yeah, I've definitely met some of the best people ever through collecting in general, not just sofubi. I mean, Amy and her husband David, they're two of my closest friends, and they've changed a lot of aspects of my life personally in greater ways than I could ever possibly put into words. So to find people like that through something as, like you said, as niche as collecting is kind of mind blowing when you really take a step back and look at it.
No, that's awesome. I totally agree. The designer toy community, it's so welcoming. And it's small, and everyone. It's just awesome just to know other people who appreciate what we like as well. But at the same time, it's just for the collectors. It's very easy and like almost pretty common to be able to meet and just get to know some of your favorite artists on a personal level. So, like meeting artists that you're a fan of. Well, it can also be. Sometimes it's a magical moment, and sometimes it doesn't live up to expectations, and sometimes it could be a letdown if you just happen to meet an artist on a grumpus day or something like that. So I don't know, but do you have any great stories to share about maybe meeting someone whose work you enjoy for the first time?
Actually, yeah. Funnily enough, there's still record of this on my Instagram. It was when Amy actually had a release for you a few years ago at Lulubelle. And you doodled on a couple of monies for me, and I picked up, the monotone monster toydom and things like that. And that was honestly a pretty awesome moment for me because, I got into the artist Gary Ham through the Android series, and researching your toys and in your art and stuff like that, I was immediately drawn in. My girlfriend's a big fan, so seeing all that stuff and collecting it very early on. And actually having you come to Lulubelle and already as being established with Amy, and that was actually one of the coolest experiences I've had in collecting.
Well, cool. Thanks.
Sounds like
Gary. Am I sensing a two-way man crush?
Yeah, we might have to get a room later.
Here's
I'm
sensing some jealousy from Chris and Carlos.
Oh yeah, totally.
Hey,
No, we're okay.
But I have, I've met some other artists. This past decon actually, I saw Carlos actually was wearing the windbreakers and the shirts that said "Mexico is the shit."
Yeah.
And I thought those were awesome. And
Thank you.
I'm sure if you saw me in person, you'd recognize me. But I didn't realize it was you and your brother at first. But I saw those, and I just thought they were so cool. So I went up and said hi, and I was like, "Oh shit, it's the Beast Brothers!" And I kind of had a little bit of a starstruck moment myself with that too, because that was the first time I'd ever seen you guys in person. So
that's cool. Thanks, man.
Oh, absolutely.
How do you like Designer Con?
Designer Con, man, I can't even begin to express how much I love that one. It's so personable. And it's really crazy in terms of the size of just what goes on in this toy scene. But despite the size of it, it's still very calm, being acclimated to things like San Diego and New York Comic-Con and just seeing the overall craziness of what's going on around you. Because realistically, the toy aspect is so small in comparison to the movies, the TV shows, the comics and stuff. So having Designer Con essentially strictly for this industry is just fantastic, and being able to just walk up to an artist and just shake their hand and introduce yourself and get in that face-to-face time and being able to have a much more greater chance of owning something really, really awesome from artists is, there's nothing beats it.
Awesome.
Yeah, you should tell Gary about Designer Con. He's never
tell
been.
Gary, because this is gonna turn into the infomercial for Designer Con.
Every episode.
They don't even have to sponsor us because we talk about them every episode. Sponsored by Designer Con. Is Lulubelle going out for 5 points? I think I saw that somewhere.
Yeah, Lulubelle will be there for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, really? Nice.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, 5 points seems to be doing really well for a first year event.
It's shaping up.
Yeah.
Yeah, the list that I've seen, I can't quite recall everyone who's going to be there so far, but it looks to like it's going to have a pretty good mixture of every bit of the corners.
Yeah, I think.
I'm just happy I get to drive to it.
How long of a drive is that? Because
it's like an 8 or 9 hour drive.
That's
but,
it.
It's not too bad. Yeah, it's not. It takes me that that long, if not longer, including airports to get to LA. So, and I have to ship all my stuff out there. So this will be better.
You bring your stuff. You don't have to worry about that.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah.
Man,
Looking forward to it.
I gotta brush up on my geography. I thought you were a little further away.
When is it gonna be, Gary?
When's what?
5 points.
Oh, May 20th and 21st, Saturday and Sunday.
Oh, nice. So are they gonna do the toy awards by then?
Yeah, no, it's actually gonna be the same weekend. I think it's gonna be the Friday night before the convention actually starts.
That's pretty cool.
But Gary, this doesn't mean you're off the hook. Just because you're going to 5 points, you still have to go to Designer Con.
Oh, no, believe me, I know I have to go this year. If I don't, I feel like I'm going to be kidnapped and taken there. So I'll definitely be there.
We'll make sure you like, Inception, like the movie. We're going to make sure you go to the convention.
Just have my bed ready, Carlos. That's all I ask. I want a nice...
You can stay at my house.
Yeah, I want a nice, comfy bed.
You can stay at my house.
Well,
yeah, you're welcome to stay here.
All right, I will. I'm going to take you up on that.
I'm sure there's plenty of places you can stay at. You're quite the famous. That's why you get crushes. You're just throwing like your net to see who bites.
He's fishing for couches.
Yeah, he's just fishing for couches, man.
As long as people know I don't put out, that's all.
And maybe cuddles. Who knows?
Just want some Chimako time. That's all.
Yeah, you're gonna hang out with him.
The dog is so rad.
Thanks, man. He's pretty cool. He's my favorite thing.
We got off onto a Chimako tangent. We always seem to. Let's get back on track, and let's do that by talking sponsorship. The Marsham Toy Hour is sponsored by printsonwood.com. If you are an artist or photographer, and you've ever wanted to have your artwork printed on beautiful, sustainable wood, and we got just the people for you. printsonwood.com. They do amazing work. You won't be disappointed. Tons of popular artists have already done limited edition fine art prints with them. They're very well established, very well known, very highly respected and rated. They'll do right by you for sure. Check them out, printsonwood.com. And 3D Retro is a beautiful brick and mortar shop located in Glendale, California. That's Southern California for anyone who doesn't know. Also, they have a website. Check them out, 3dretro.com. And then there's StrangeCat Toys. They'll take care of all your designer toy needs. They're just a website, but if you want to head on over to the website, you can use promo code MARSHAM at checkout and receive 10% off your order. So, Robert, I think for our listeners, since you're a collector of primarily Japanese soft vinyl toys, I think, what do you say? Well, okay, edition size. There's probably definitely a big difference that our listeners would probably notice. Toys generally produced in China are usually runs of minimum 500 pieces. There might be that 500 pieces might be spread out over 3-4 colorways, but that would still mean most things would have like a run of 100 or something. What would you say the standard, like average edition size of a toy produced out of Japan would be?
I mean, that really just depends on the artist. From what I've seen, strictly just kind of from a collector's aspect, a lot of times when artists will release a new figure, they'll kind of put out a little bit of a higher number, somewhere between like 25 and 40 maybe, to more or less just get as much of it out there as they feel like they can to kind of test out the waters and see how fans are, kind of feeling the toy and see how they're liking it, questions, comments, concerns, sort of thing. And generally, once they start to pick up a little more traction and notoriety and people become more and more fans of it, they, from what I've seen, tend to keep the runs a little bit lower, depending on either whether if it's a convention setting, there tends to be more, as where if it's an online release, there'll be like 10 to 15 of a run. If it's painted, they're generally smaller than like a blank release, where a blank release could be like a run of 30 and a painted run will be 10, because one takes a lot more time than the other, of course. So it varies up and down really from artist to artist. Overall, I generally don't see most runs go over 30, and I mean 40 is purely speculation, and even then I'd say that's a bit of a stretch.
Yeah. Yeah, 40 seems to be too many. A cool side note, when you do toys in Japan, it's not easy to get to make them, but once you have the connection and you have the, your mold and all that stuff, you can order 1, 2, 3, 5, 10.
Yeah.
Like it's really cool
Yeah.
because you don't have to order a ton. Like I order a
Yeah.
couple of marble samples, you know, of course you have to pay for the shipping and it's cheaper if you do a bunch. But every time I do an order of the sofubi calaveritas, I ask them like to throw one in any color they're using for other toys, and they just send me, like one random color. I got a really cool marble clear glow in the dark one.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's pretty. And I wanted to do a run of those, but I just like having that one. But it's pretty cool because they're like super. I don't know. It's like it's more artisanal than like. I mean, people think about factories like these places full of machines and all that stuff. Even in China, it's people making this stuff, painting them with their hands and all that stuff, making molds and.
Well,
So but in Japan, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, and that's the really big differentiator between the two. Where if I take a mold to China, somewhere in China, they'll tell you, "Oh yeah, we can make this for you, but you have a minimum of 500." As where if you take it to Japan, you pay X amount for the process, X amount for the molds, et cetera, and then from then on, you can literally command whether you want 1 or you want 100. Granted, those times will stretch. If you want 100 figures, that's going to take a while, of course. But even when I was out there were some artists. We pulled 40 of something, and then another artist only asked for 5 for a single release. So it's very artist dependent, and it's from what I can tell, not being an artist but just being a collector, having that creative freedom to say, well, I only want or I only need 5 of these, and not have to pay for 50 of them just to get that 10.
Yeah, the setup is a little bit. It might look like a little bit more expensive, but at the end, the fact that you can order very low runs of something makes it more special, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
For collectors and for like toy makers, because it's like, I don't know, you're offering something that is super limited and like one of a kind sometimes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and when you, again, from my perspective, not on a rarity base as far as like I have this and nobody else does, but just kind of having that feeling of luck. Like, man, there was only 15 of these, and out of the hundreds of people that went for it, I managed to get one. So it's you have that kind of that special feeling of retainment.
I'm gonna blow your guys' minds right now. You guys are familiar with the Maguro Senpai vinyl toy that's been pretty popular recently? So it was made by Mame Moyashi.
Yeah.
It's the tuna character. He's kind of filleting himself and everything. So
he's wielding a knife.
Yeah, so they're doing they just wrapped up a exclusive pre-order with Instinct Toy of the salmon colorway. They received over 5,000 pre-orders for that toy.
What?
Yeah,
wow.
It's insane, dude.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
5,000.
I had no idea that.
Can you imagine pulling 5,000 of those things?
I'm painting them too.
Oh.
I mean, I haven't seen the version they're doing, but the one I know, it has like a lot of detail.
Yeah, the paint apps on those things are nothing to slouch at.
Yeah, and they basically they send out a little, on their Instagram account saying like, we did not anticipate this many orders, so it's going to take a little longer. Please bear with us, but thank you so much for your support. But 5,000, like,
that's amazing.
I thought 50 is a lot by most standards, but 500 would have been impressive. But 5,000, that's
5,000.
That's some mass market numbers right there.
I'd be hard pressed to say maybe even Medicom hasn't seen numbers for a single figure that high. That's pretty crazy.
Insane.
No. It's like, it's insane.
I mean, Mame Moyashi came out of nowhere. Like, they came out with their very first Maguro Senpai figure, and that colorway was their first release, and that piece got 1,000 pre-orders, and they came out of nowhere.
That's insane.
So
it's insane because at $50 a pop, that's like $250,000. Like you don't see those numbers in the toy industry anymore. Maybe back in the day, but I mean, it's a very, very solid piece. It's super cool.
Yeah.
And good for them. Congratulations.
Yeah,
man.
I'm stoked for them.
No kidding.
That's good for them, and I mean that's good for everybody.
Yeah, great.
When somebody
It's good for everybody.
That kind of success.
It's funny because some people are like jealous, but it's such a small niche market that we have that we just have to take care of each other. And like if somebody like these make it big, like praise them, like and encourage them to keep on doing that.
Yeah, and what's great too is they've like their follow-up figures are the lobster figure is just as solid, if not more.
Yeah, it's just as good, man.
Yep.
So yeah, they've really hit on something, and them teaming up with Instinct Toy, who also are just like firing on all cylinders right now too.
Yep.
Yeah, their projects with James Groman are phenomenal.
Yeah, that stuff is crazy. So no, that's huge news, and that's
amazing.
Awesome for them.
It is. I didn't even know there was 5,000 people in the designer toys. I have to imagine they're reaching buyers outside of this little toy niche that we're in. I almost feel like every Japanese sushi bar across the world ordered one of these things or something.
Well, there's a lot of international collectors too.
Yeah. But I mean, even when I stayed out in Japan, there was, a handful of like sake bars or sushi restaurants that literally had like the theme of their restaurant was, having Gamera toys or Godzilla and Ultraman and things like that, just kind of littered around the restaurant. And a lot of their dishes were named after characters and things like that. So having sushi bars when I order these figures is really not that far out of the realm.
This figure is really nicely articulated. I'm looking at a photo now, and it's the first time I've actually seen them really try to pose the figure in a completely different pose, and it's pretty rad. The articulation works really well with it. I didn't know it had this much articulation to it.
Yeah, that thing's got a lot of personality in it.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
Does anybody know if the knife that it comes with is vinyl or is it metal?
It looks like metallic paint.
Yeah, I would imagine it's metallic paint. Because oddly enough, I saw one in hand last month, and for some reason, that's pretty much the only thing I didn't check.
Looking at it again, it does look like it's vinyl, but it was just, I think because I was thinking of Mutant Vinyl Hardcore, he does some with actual metal knives.
Yeah, he does razor blades in the Sam Heinous head; those are real. But the butcher knives that he gives the Sam Heinous, those, as far as I know, those are resin.
Oh, okay.
And did you guys get to see the other? There's other figure, like apart from the crab, there's a squid.
I haven't seen the squid yet.
I saw it on the Toy Chronicle. There's a little, like in the conventions that they put the prototypes, they have a squid, and it's awesome. Like it goes, all of those figures look. They look really cool together. Like the crab, what do you call these? The
Maguro Senpai.
It's not a salmon. It's not a salmon. It's a tuna.
Tuna, yeah.
The tuna and the squid, they look really cool.
Yeah, they're doing a great job with the whole just branding and everything of this line that they're doing. It's really nicely done.
Oh yeah, with 5,000 pre-orders. Oh yeah,
that's amazing.
That's
I'm sure they're gonna be making amazing toys with that money.
Oh yeah. I think they're even doing like giant scale too. I saw a photo where there's their standard size, but it looks like they're potentially having like a giant version available.
Yeah,
but
I think I saw a sneak of that too. Giant toys are kind of making a pretty solid appearance. I mean, they were getting pretty big for a while with like anywhere between like the 10 and 12 inch, but I mean, there's been some pretty crazy stuff teased out there lately.
Yeah.
The new one that Jim Groman is working on is huge.
Oh yeah. I mean, even Paul Kaiju, he teased basically a supercharged Boss Carry-On that looks like it's probably going to be if I had to guess, maybe between 14 and 16 inches tall.
Wow. It's crazy.
That's crazy. And when I was in the factory in Japan, I saw them pulling an Ultraman SifuB, and it was 2 pieces, and that thing when it was put together was 4 feet tall. Final.
Oh, I've seen footage of that.
Yeah, and the crazy thing was watching the guy pull it out of the mold. He had to reach his entire arm inside the mold, like up to his shoulder, and pull it out.
Gosh.
I mean, the mold probably weighs 200 pounds. It's on it's on a big steel cradle, and they had it like on a conveyor and put it inside this giant centrifuge to spin it. But that's pretty crazy. Like
that would be really
kind of
awesome
scale,
to see.
That'd be amazing to have a figure that size.
Oh yeah.
So Robert, as a collector, I know a lot of people start out as collectors, but they eventually get into producing or doing their own stuff. Do you ever see yourself getting the itch to want to help produce a toy for someone else, or even doing your own stuff?
Oh man, I've had the mental itch where I sit back and think like, oh, this would be really cool if I did that, but I never get like a clear image or idea or really like anything sort of like I have no artistic value really, and I have no like creative output in terms of like creating something original or anything like that. So I've had the idea of like, man, it'd be really cool if I made a toy or if I had my own toy, but that's pretty much where the thought process stops, because I can't really put anything down on paper, whether it's an original design or even like an idea that I could relay to someone else and kind of have them construct it for me. So I'm not opposed to maybe someday something striking me and I get inspired and maybe begin the process. But as it stands, I'm strictly collector.
Okay.
Well, since you have experience and all, why don't you guys open up a SifuB factory in the U.S. and help us all?
I wish we could, man. Yeah, I can't remember exactly what they are, but there are chemical restrictions to the U.S. as to
just
why
don't
they can't
tell anybody.
Don't tell them.
I wish it was that easy.
Cartel.
Be like the Al Capone of SofuB, just running.
Yeah, right. Like in your basement.
Yeah.
you could do it, Chris. You got a really cool basement.
Oh yeah. I mean, I don't see how resin could be any less toxic than vinyl. I mean, and the fact that there's toys that are produced in the U.S. So there's got to be I think there needs to be a little bit more digging done into that. I think the problem is it costs a lot of money to set.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, because I mean, Andrew Bell's Dealmaker, that's soft vinyl, and that was produced in the U.S., was it not?
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, and it totally smells like a shower curtain.
Yeah.
It does.
But I mean, it would be really great. Just for shipping alone. I mean, not that I'm like a made in America tourist. I mean, I love the fact that there's all the there's a real craftsmanship to Japanese SifuB, but getting that stuff shipped over here can be brutal.
Yeah, no, totally.
Yeah.
And the shipping, it can usually add a few extra bucks to your unit price for sure. So Robert, are you a sports fan at all?
To a relatively bare bones sense, but I used to be when I was a kid, but I still have my favorite teams now.
Okay, so let's put a little sports twist on the art world then. Art toy world. Let's say this is basketball. 5 players on a team.
Okay.
Of the entire league, all the artists in the world or whatever, you have to build your all-star team of 5 starters. Who do you go with?
Oh man, that's a hard one.
You can name some bench players too, but mainly I want to know who your starters are.
Well, without question, Splurt would be on there. He's definitely my top favorite artist. Paul Kaiju would have to be there as well. I'd have to say Shirahama Toy would be number 3. Okay. He's the creator of the Kumon and the Nekomata Jijio. Wow.
2 more.
The other 2. Nope. Yeah. That's a
Don't forget
Mutant
Battle Hardcore. Come on.
Yeah, you know what? We'd have to put Rich up there too, because that guy, the amount of creativity that he pumps out and how much of it comes out on a constant basis is, nothing short of impressive. And
careful, the Skull Brainers aren't going to give you a hard time on this at all.
Yeah. And maybe Target Earth. Target Earth is another company that I'm a really big fan of.
Okay.
And if I had to choose a bench player, I've only recently kind of gotten into him physically as far as collecting his stuff as of late, but he's been long-standing as Long Neck Toys.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that one.
Oh yeah, he's got some pretty far out there stuff.
Okay, so that's your sixth man off the bench. Cool.
I think that'd be an interesting question to ask people in general, because I think, you know, the All-Star moniker would essentially carry on to which artists are currently you know, being favorited overall by the general scene. So,
right.
You know, there's a lot of recent artists like Kaiju Tan or Blood Guts Toys. You know, those guys are by now well established, but not exactly to the extent of a lot of these other companies like M1 Go or obviously like Bull Mark or Target Earth and things like that. So I think the variation in answers would be very interesting, because even though it's all SifuB, there's still kind of like sub genres of what they collect, whether there's strictly vintage collectors or there's strictly keshi collectors, or, you know, there's some people who only collect bootleg soft vinyl toys and things like that. So it could very well be all over the place.
Yeah.
Keshi is a term that hasn't come up yet on this podcast, I don't think. And I know what it is, but could Robert, would you mind illuminating the audience?
I mean, to the best of my knowledge, I'm not the hugest collector of it, but I do have a few pieces. But keshi tends to relate to figures that are smaller in scale, generally like 1 to 2 inches tall, and they're made of rubber. But despite the fact of their size, they generally pack in a lot of detail. So they're, you know,
so like muscle figures, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So they're instantly recognizable for the amount of detail that they get into these figures, despite how small they are.
Yeah, what's awesome too is like at Nakano Broadway, there's a whole store that's dedicated to keshi figures.
Yes, there is. Oh yeah.
And it's a pretty huge thing. I mean, what's awesome too is because all the toys are an inch tall. You can put 5,000 toys in 2 feet of space.
Yeah, those displays in that store are incredible, because you could easily spend an hour or longer just looking into one case, because you're kind of microscoping on every single one that's in there.
Yeah, and with you know, OMFG and Super 7 getting in on the game with those style figures here, I mean, that's a pretty, for people wanting to get into a collector game, there's a pretty low barrier for entry there. So,
absolutely, yeah, and there's a ton of variety with them as well.
There you go. There's your new term of the day.
Okay, yeah. So Super 7 is doing a lot of keshi stuff recently. They're doing the Shogun Warriors, and they even had there's like some Street Fighter figures, and I think He-Man. Yeah, so I imagine they have a bunch of lines coming out in the future too. So yeah, if you're a keshi collector, it seems like it's a good time for you. So Robert, with you primarily being interested in like the sofubi side of things, how often do you buy something more mainstream, more mass-produced? Do you ever see something in, you know, Chinese vinyl or wood or resin or something that you just instantly have a connection with, and you buy that stuff? How often does that happen?
I do, actually, yeah. Just within the last couple of days, actually, I picked up some slicks by Andrew Bell, the Psycho versions. So they're glow in the dark with like the blood splatter. And I also picked up one of Frank Kozik's variants of the Toy Cube Sharky. Realistically, you know, I'd say SifuB in general kind of has my heart as it is, but there's still a lot of, you know, the Western vinyl where that was kind of like my roots, where I came from, sort of thing. And I've more or less kind of abandoned the platform toy, things like Dunnies and Android. Because of SifuB, I've kind of come to appreciate more original sculpts and things like that. So a lot of the StrangeCat toys, like, you know, Jermaine Rogers' Darrow Bear or Jeremy Fish's Eternal Camper, or even, you know, Gary Ham's Hermes, like having something more original based and 110% from the ground up, created from a single mind, is a lot more enticing for me. So I do still have some Western figures, nowhere near the volume as I used to, but I definitely still appreciate them.
Okay, cool. You guys want to do a quick round of lightning before we wrap it up?
Let's do it.
Okay. You ready, Robert?
I'll do my best.
All right. What was your favorite childhood toy?
Oh, I'd have to say the proton pack from Ghostbusters. My parents were able to finally afford one year. They went through hell and back to be able to afford that. So
Wow.
It was a little proton pack that shot out foam lasers.
Yeah.
Nice. I remember those.
Do you remember what your first designer toy purchase was?
First designer toy purchase. Oh, the Android Series 1, actually.
Oh, wow.
I had no idea what vinyl toys were, vinyl collectibles or anything. I used to be really big into hacking and rooting Android phones, and one of the tech blogs that I read said that vinyl collectible Androids came out. I had no idea what those were, but they had a local listing for stores that might carry them, and I just happened to find Red Hot Robot, who used to be a vinyl retailer in Phoenix, and that was the very, very first time I was ever exposed to designer vinyl toys.
Wow, very cool. I thought you brought up Red Hot Robot too. That's a flashback right there.
I really miss Jason
Yeah.
and what he did for Phoenix.
It was good, but Amy's kind of filled those shoes too. So
Oh yeah, without
all
question.
good. In your collection, what toy is most prominently displayed?
Ooh. I mean, there's a lot that are like that. The Obaki Dog by Secret Base is for sure prominently displayed. I've got 60 of those. The Cinema Monster by Splurt and Secret Toy is prominently displayed. However, if I had to choose one that's the most important, it would be the Darrow Bear by Jermaine Rogers, as that figure itself really kind of sparked mine and Amy's friendship, which led me into my role with her and Luke at Lulubelle.
Okay.
So if I were to choose something like the most prominent, important one, that would be it.
Cool. What toy in your collection has made your girlfriend go, "You paid what for that?"
Oh shit! I don't even pardon my language, but man, I don't even know where to begin with that one.
That's the collector life right there. Though.
Yeah. What's actually really funny about that is, she's a really big fan of Uwamu. So when I first started collecting, especially in SofuB, if I was buying like, $200, $300 one-offs, she would kind of lose her mind about it. However, at San Diego Comic-Con in 2014, she saw the figure Deathra by Gargamel, and they had a one-off, and I bought it for her for our anniversary, and it was a $420 toy.
Wow.
So since then, she hasn't uttered a single peep. And when she came out to Japan with me for a week, and while she was there, she spent a pretty good chunk of change at Uwamu. So she's been enveloped into it as much as I have, just not on the same scale as far as quantity.
That's cool though, that you're in a relationship with someone who kind of embraces and understands what you're into. That's cool.
Yeah. Well, originally she kind of was just like, I don't get this, and I started showing her some stuff from, like Andrew Bell and things like that, and then she kind of started to come around a little bit more, and then the second she found out about Uwamu, it was just downhill from there for her.
That's the thing about the designer toy scene. I do believe there's enough genres going on. There's going to be something for someone out there. It's just whether you're whether you're into food toys or cute stuff or the grotesque. There's something out there for everybody.
Yeah, well, I mean, in that spirit of the conversation, there's a lot of people that, once I started getting heavily into collecting, would kind of poke fun at me, like, what are you doing? Like, at the time, like, you're 24 years old, like, why are you collecting all this stuff? And now if you walk into their house, they have very, very prominent Funko Pop collections.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
So, again, there's something out there for everyone.
There is. All right, what's your white whale toy? What's the toy that you've been searching for and hoping to one day obtain?
Oh, that would either have to be the original Devilman tribute Mockbat by Paul Kaiju, or the Santa Claus Obaki Dog. It's the Santa Claus Obaki Dog has like a little Santa Claus suit and a present sack that comes with it, and it's on glow-in-the-dark vinyl, and the sprays on the head of the figure emulate Christmas lights. And the Obaki Dog is my favorite toy overall. I love that thing a lot. So that's probably been the hardest one for me to find or get a hold of.
Okay. You guys have any lightning questions for him?
No, it sounds like you got that one covered.
All right.
It's interesting talking to a collector versus artists about a lot of these lightning round questions about what you're displaying and what you're after. You seem to have a more readily prominent answer.
Yeah, for sure.
We're like, I stopped spending money on toys when I started making them.
Yeah. I think that's a really big part of it for a lot of artists. I mean, I've visited several artists' house where they are collectors themselves and they are current. However, the number one thing they have most of, as far as quantity, are prototypes of their own toys. Yep. So
yeah, that's definitely true.
Yeah, and I think that's awesome.
Yeah, Amanda and I are both we're antiques collectors, but we collect a lot of like sort of oddities and things. So it was funny. We just actually picked up a 100-year-old Ouija board.
Wow!
And it was funny because you were talking about your girlfriend. We walked into the antique mall and she saw it on the wall and she goes, "I want that." And it was like that, like. When we find something, like it's the same thing with toy collectors. Like when you see something that something just strikes a chord with you, and you have to get it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's right, Chris. I saw that she was posting on Instagram just like vintage stamps she's been finding, and I think that's super cool.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, we have a lot of old stuff in this house, and it's interesting because we collect differently than what we make. So like I make really cute stuff, but I collect a lot of like animal skulls and taxidermy, and the toys that I do collect, Reelhead and Mutant Vinyl Hardcore and James Groman, and so which is super far away from what I do, but it's just interesting. Like you don't have to be locked into one thing and be a purist.
Oh yeah, big time. Yeah, that's another whole entire conversation, but there's a lot of Western toy collectors that kind of condemn the sofubi and vice versa, where it's like if you collect one, you can't collect the other, and
it's just dumb.
Yeah, I think that's a barrier that really needs to get broken down. I mean, I've met a couple of collectors personally that don't really like people knowing that they collect Western stuff because they kind of feel like it taints more or less the Eastern aspect of why they collect, where that whole death to false vinyl kind of thing comes into play. Which
I don't know. You should feel. I mean, listen, we're only on this planet for a certain amount of time, and if you can't enjoy what you're doing, just like what's the point?
Exactly.
And don't put other people down for what they're enjoying either. So everybody have fun. Come on.
I remember when I did the Whooper Looper. I was actually classifying it as a sofubi toy. Because that was my first toy ever produced in soft vinyl, I was getting some grief from people that they felt that I shouldn't be able to call it sofubi. It was like, why? Why can't I do that? That's what it is. But some of the collectors are very protective of, I guess, someone like me, like a Western guy just going, to Japan and getting a toy produced, I guess.
Yeah, it draws on a very thin line of collectors feeling like somebody's trying to take advantage of the scene that they're a part of. Yeah. But I mean, it's like, when a lot of these artists start out with resin and then they go into Japanese soft vinyl. So what's the difference between making a production toy, going the Western route and then deciding maybe I'll give sofubi a chance, get your toes wet in as many swimming pools as you can.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. It was just one of those things. It's like, it's such a great medium, and it's just a shame that if someone does want to just go right into that medium and they've just happened to find the channels and got it done, that it's not respected. It's you almost feel like you have to shank the bully in prison to finally get the respect enough to earn that right? So it's just kind of weird that Whooper Looper I never felt like got the respect from the hardcore Eastern crowd.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people tend to look at it as almost like a rite of passage sort of thing, where it's kind of like you pay your due diligence and you get your time in and the history and things like that. Because a lot of people, especially recently, because things like Instagram have made toys and the general scene so much more accessible. A lot of these artists recently, literally no one ever saw a single thing from them, and then just bam, all of a sudden they've got a brand new soft vinyl toy that, you know, a lot of people feel is very contrived, or it's very forced, or it's too indicative of something that's already been released, and they're just trying to kind of like cash in on the hype, or they're trying to cash in on somebody else's ideas through their toys and things like that. So I think it's really just a lot of people are very weary of newcomers until they kind of see what your intentions are and where you take your toys and where you take your artwork from that point.
Yeah, I get that. That's true.
Yeah, Gary, I think having a toy held up in production in Japan for over 3 years has given you the stamp of approval.
Yeah.
For SifuB.
Yeah. Paid their dues, right?
Yeah.
There you go.
Working on that one.
That's
Trial
it
by
for the long
fight.
haul.
Yeah.
Trial by fight.
Yeah. Well, I think, Robert, I think that's about it. Do you guys have any further questions for Robert?
No, I think this is a good one.
Yeah, I like it. Collector series.
We covered a lot. Yeah, collector thing is cool.
Robert, being our first collector in this series, is there someone that you think that we should talk to? Is there like maybe one collector that you can think of that you think we should definitely have on?
It's such a varying aspect. I mean, personally, I would love if you guys could get Catherine Park on.
Oh yeah,
because her, yeah. I mean, she's kind of like the polar opposite of collecting from where I'm at.
Yeah, exactly.
But she's also very, very well tied in with, you know, Andrew Bell, and, you know, now she's a Toy Chronicle, but she's also a huge Gary Nut freak Gary Ham freak. And also she's a really big Owamu fan too. So having the collector's aspect is super fun.
Well, good. I'm glad you liked it, and thanks for the suggestion. We'll reach out to Catherine and see if she's up for it. And thanks to you very much for coming on and being our very first collector in the series. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. This was really, really cool. Hopefully, if it ever I'm invited back on, I'd really like to have George back on as well. I like that guy's upfront, give no shits nature. That guy speaks his mind, and I love it. So
he'd be making fun of every single name of toy that you named. You're like, yeah, whatever that is.
Yeah. But that's okay, because that's George. We've come to accept and love it.
Yeah, we love that guy.
Exactly.
Even though he's in Hawaii right now.
He might not come back.
Yeah, looking for the lost hatch.
All right, so Robert, why don't you take a brief moment and just let people know where they can find you?
I mean, Instagram is pretty much it. Just the x_Duchess_Gummy Buns_X. And other than that, the only other presence I have is lulubelltoys.com. And if you click on the blog tab, you will see some of the short photo exposés that I had during my trip in Japan to several artist studios as well as a couple factories.
All right, cool. And they'll probably be able to spot you at 5 Points and DesignerCon.
Yeah, absolutely. We will 110% be there.
Cool. All right, Chris.
You can find me on Instagram at Chris Reiniak, Facebook at Chris Reiniak, Twitter at Chris Reiniak. And you can also find me on Patreon, patreon.com/Chris Reiniak. And you can find my web store through all of those.
Nice. Beastie.
You can find me and my brother at the Beast Brothers on Instagram, at thebeastbrothers.com. And like always, you can find Chamaco at My Name is Chamaco.
And I'm Gary Ham. You can find me at Gary Ham on Instagram or superham.com. This has been the Marsham Toy Hour. We'll be back next week, not because we have to, but because we want to. Until our next transmission, we're signing off. Bye.
Bye.
Hooray!
Thanks for having me on, guys.
Woo! Yeah, that was a good one, man. Thanks.